Hello, everyone. Today is March 23rd, 2022. I'm here today with Ed and Zakay. Eden is my good friend and attorney. And so, after being my good friend and an attorney, what's up now, Eden?
Well, I'm still your friend, thankfully. So I don't know if that's
yes.
after, but during. We're during in friendship, after in law school.
It endured COVID.
Yeah, true. It's always easier when you don't need to, hang out with the person, like in person, to keep up the friendship. If you can have a good conversation, it makes it easier. Oh, Jesus.
Yes. Wow. Eden's phone went off.
Terrible.
Popular Eden.
Let's restart it.
We don't have to restart it.
Can we just dive right back in and you can clip it?
Yes.
Because the phone rang like mid-conversation, but...
Yes.
Okay. That's so shitty. Damn it. It was good. Anyway, let's just put that one behind us.
Yeah, let's put that one behind us.
Okay, so are we good now?
We're good.
So anyway, where were we?
We were,
By the way, just, for everybody on the podcast, just so you know, my phone went off, so that's what you don't do at a podcast.
No.
It's if there's just one rule when you come on a podcast, just silence
Mute
your phone. I don't know
yeah.
why I couldn't get that. I don't know.
We had another rule, no dogs allowed, and we already broke that one.
No dog. True. We broke them, pretty much all of them. No dogs allowed.
None.
I love dogs, but
yes,
they can be a little loud.
They can be loud. They can be in your face.
They can. These two.
Yeah, especially with a one mine.
100% in your face. Really, in all kinds of places, all over the place.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, here we are, Karush.
Here we are.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. We were talking about cooking.
Yeah. Yes, we were.
Before this, we're both avid cooks.
Yeah. Yes, and it's. I mean, and that's what is cooking. There's cooking, and then there is. You can take that in so many different directions.
Yes.
I think it's something people don't think about. Probably not a lot of people. Well, I think it's kind of picking back up, and people like to kind of do their own everything now, including cooking. So maybe that's picking back up, but I think for a long time it hasn't necessarily, at least just from what I've perceived, it hasn't been very much of a thing that people. It's not like playing guitar or something else. Along those lines. To many people, it's rare. So it's. I think it's coming back now.
Yes.
But it means something different to every person. That cooks. So for you, it's it can mean something.
Yes.
And for me, it can mean something
else.
So for me, there is so much that goes beyond just eating the food and the calories, I think, too. It's a creative process. I always say it's the only art that you can eat. So.
There's no other art you can eat?
Well, depends. You tell me. I hope you're not eating, your paintings or your...
Play-Doh?
Play-Doh. Hopefully not. I don't know if that's art, really, but that's, I don't know what kind of art you're doing.
It's not art. You're right.
But it is. But honestly, cooking is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is.
I know for you, I feel like it's kind of almost a health thing.
Yes.
See, that's funny. To me, health is important, and I always try to find. But that's kind of not the main thing that I get out of it, and I want to start putting that more honestly, because it's starting to, but also because I think it's for the long run. I got to stop using so much butter.
Yes.
And so much all kinds of stuff that's delicious.
Yes.
That's delicious, but that's not maybe too good.
Too good.
Yeah. So.
It's that's actually the one thing I like about going out. So when I go on vacations, there's a lot of eating out. Obviously, we're not cooking anything, but one good thing is that like you said, there's a lot of butter. I put a lot of fat and cream in my stuff, and you're gonna get a select amount of food That's the one nice thing about eating. I think eating out's very expensive and you don't always get what you want. But the one thing is like you're gonna get this plate of food. It's gonna be that, and then you're not gonna like eat everything you just cooked.
Yeah, you can portion much better.
Yes.
I also think that there really is something to knowing what went in your food.
Yes,
You know,
there
I don't
is.
know. It's like even when you go to the fanciest restaurant, you just don't know. And
No.
there's something special about it. Something special about taking a group of ingredients that are in various forms, uncooked, you know, unchopped, whatever, different forms, and turning them into something else on an individual level, and then combining them and turning them something totally different on a dish level. Just the process itself, when you really think about it, is a pretty beautiful thing.
Yes, it is.
You know, there's basically little codes out there of combinations that do well on our tongue.
Yes.
And that's you know, it's interesting,
Very.
to me at least, and it's and it's so connected to who we are, I think, and what, as in, you know, like I know you're Persian.
Yes.
You know, there's a food that comes with that, and that is expressed every time someone cooks Persian food as a
Yes.
Persian. That's how they grow up, or even not as a Persian, but it tells something about your experience. You know, how you grow up. It's something very personal. You know, because it's something that you do in the home, and that's what your mom or your dad fed you when you were just a baby. The spices and the ingredients, that I think it gets ingrained in you quite deep, you know, from an early age. So it's a very intimate thing, and it's a very beautiful thing. So to me, it's maybe under acknowledged as an art form, but you know, and at least among people who don't cook.
Well, one thing we talked about before we started this podcast was the underappreciation of cooking. And I didn't grow up with much cooking in the household. And like we said, a lot of Americans don't cook. And
Yeah.
even I know someone who kind of makes fun of me for cooking because they can get DoorDash for $10 a month. They don't, they like, why should I waste time going to the grocery store? Then why should I waste time cooking? And then why should I waste time cleaning when I can just pay $10 a month and get free delivery to my doorstep, whatever, meals within a close distance, and does DoorDash?
Yeah, look, everybody has a certain amount of time in the day. They choose to spend it in different ways. With that said, though, I do think if you really want, and you put the time in at the front end, you can get to a point where you're cooking very efficiently. And I think in some ways, if you're ordering food from DoorDash, it's always going to be faster. And if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. And it's the same reason I don't dance. That's an art form. I don't dance.
Yes.
And so if somebody doesn't want to cook, that's, no worries. So to me, I don't mind those people. I don't feel like people are obligated to cook, or that there's any moral thing on people to cook. I don't, but I do think that people take it for granted.
Yes.
And people miss out on the opportunity, not for lack of time, but for lack of curiosity, maybe. And because it's pretty tough, actually.
Yes. There's a learning curve.
There's a learning curve. There's you got to learn how to use quite a lot of tools, I think. And, to some people that could be a total mystery. Like I said, I grew up in my house. They cooked. And, whether the dish was good, the bad, whatever. And, a lot of times it's great. A lot of times, it never comes out perfect. Just like when a musician plays 100 gigs, a couple of them aren't going to go as good, But I was around the tools. I was around the ingredients. I saw the different ways that you could engage with the food, and that's what that is the big step that if you don't have in the house is gonna be a pretty intimidating, I think, sort of wall
Yes.
for people to get engaged and to do that. So, um, so I understand, people. Some people are hesitant about it, and some people prefer DoorDash. To me, that's fine. But it is a beautiful art, and I
Yes,
think,
it is.
I mean, it's rare to have something that you literally can taste. I know it sounds like it's funny, but it's like it's an art form that you literally get to consume afterwards.
Literally.
And we all like consuming. At least I do. I don't know. I mean,
And you know how you did.
a little too much lately, really. I've been
Yes.
consuming. I need to stop consuming a little, but that's the truth. So it's cool, and I love, for me, I think my home base is sort of Mediterranean food, but now I do everything, and there's a lot of great chefs that show the kind of classical techniques on YouTube. That's really how I learned. Just watch YouTube videos, and you try to imitate what they do, and eventually you learn. Eventually, really, the point where you get good, I think, with cooking is when you learn to balance and to understand each piece, why you're doing what you're doing. And that's really, that could be said about anything, I think. When you know why you're doing the things that you're doing, you're probably going to be, that probably means that you've come a little bit closer to mastering it.
Yes.
And it's the same thing with guitar and music. When a musician only knows how to open up the internet and look up the chords and play, based on what they're saying or the notes or whatever, that is a somewhat shallow level of mastery, because it's understanding how the different chords piece together in a more fundamental sense that makes you, in my opinion, a real musician. I don't know. Maybe that's a controversial thing to say. Maybe there's a lot of people who just follow the thing, but I think understanding the way the different schemes is very important. And it's the same thing with cooking. Should you use an acid? Are you balancing the salt with the sugar and the and the acid and the fats? Are you balancing all these things? Are you thinking about the flavor? Is there too many flavors? Are there too little flavors?
Yes.
You have to be able to analyze the food and understand what's going on behind the scenes.
Yes.
Anyway, I don't know. Are we on the Food Network here? I'm rambling about food, huh?
Food is important.
It is.
And something that you say, it's like, you said it like a few minutes ago, you kind of want to know what's in your food. And when you go out, even when you go out to the nicest restaurant, you don't really know what's in your food.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what's nice about and so captivating about those restaurants, Itchy Berries, that they literally cook in front of your face. And I think that's something that people really like about that. But like you also alluded to, you had cooking in your home.
Mm-hmm.
When you were young. You were around the ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
You were around the salt being added. You were around the
spices, sure.
The fats, the butters,
exactly.
The meats, the vegetables, the grains,
and the tools. I mean, if we were making falafel, my mom would pull out she'd use a big meat grinder, and put the chickpeas inside, instead of meat. So it would look the same way ground beef comes out of a machine, but it would be chickpeas.
Wow.
Nobody's, and nowadays you can figure it out. If you want to learn how to cook falafel, you could YouTube it, and I'm sure there's a video out there that'll show you. But I think really a very short period of time ago, 10 years or however, when YouTube was, it wasn't there, not just YouTube, but in general, there was not as much, and maybe more, maybe 20 years really. But somewhere between 10 and 20 years, there not only became a large access of, or a large amount of information on the internet about not just cooking, but every other hobby you could possibly have. But I think it also became very digestible to people.
Yes.
Because, reading and this and that, now you can find a YouTube video, boom, boom, boom. They've perfected because part of it was the society needed to learn how to make really good, easy to digest videos. Because we've only recently learned that how short of an attention span we have.
And it's
you know,
getting shorter.
and so it's not about that the information wasn't out there. It was, I think that it took some time for these videos and the knowledge to go out there in a way that's digestible to viewers.
Yes.
So, but anyway, all that being said, when you grow up in that environment, you excuse me, you at least have a clue. You know,
Yes.
you know that if you want to make falafel, that's kind of what the process is. Or if you want to, make, I don't know, like fried chicken, or in my house we call it schnitzel, but fried chicken. You know that there's going to be maybe flour, there's going to be some breadcrumbs, there's going to be egg. You at least know. And you can just try to take it from there, and you start messing around with it. Or really fried anything, by the way. That's pretty much sometimes you can do no breadcrumbs. Sometimes you can do corn
meal.
Or cornmeal, or you can do
Corn flakes.
starch. A lot of Asian foods cook with cornstarch, not with flour.
Yes.
They fry with cornstarch. So you can do that too. But anyway, the bottom line is you need to have an idea about it. And then you start experimenting, and you go, oh, what if I did, what if I don't know, pickled onions and put that on? Or, you just start kind of messing around with what you got. And a lot of times for me, it's just opening the fridge, seeing what's in there, and trying to figure something out.
Yes.
That tastes good.
That involves going to the grocery store, though.
Yeah, and I do that.
Which a lot of people
don't like to do.
And even if they do it, they don't even know where to start.
Yeah, look, there's again, it comes back to time and priorities, and how close a grocery store is to your house, and how efficient you are at going through it, and how much people have different things that they like doing, and that's and honestly, if I had the money and the will to go online and pick out my groceries and do it, but I don't know why. I just like, it's out of laziness in a weird way. I like being at the store, and it's also I think it's also out of
being
for
human.
me the way, yes, because we like to see what we're about to eat.
Yes.
Completely. I agree with you, but
even see people in the market.
True. Just to get that interaction, it's true, especially nowadays.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I know. I agree. But I think for me, it's I also like to, if you see something fresh, or if you see something that looks good, sometimes you just get ideas. You're in there and you go, oh, wait. Especially in the meat section. You find something that's on discount, whatever, and oh, perfect.
Yes.
Grab that and figure something out. And that can be fun because you learn things too.
Or like you said, you can get it on the internet, but like, how do you know the mushrooms don't look terrible and aren't, slimy?
So true.
And
yeah, you never have more certainty than going out, entering the grocery store, looking around, grabbing the thing that you're going to buy, smelling it if you have to. I don't care. I'll smell it.
It's fun.
Maybe it wasn't okay the last 2 years, but I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
It's fun, and it's and it gives you some certainty that what you're bringing in the house is good.
Yes.
And it's, in a weird way, it gives you, I think once you cook with raw ingredients and turn that into a dish, you learn to recognize, you learn to appreciate healthy food. And I guess the best term for this is whole foods, like foods that are
real.
that are real. Yeah. And that started, with that as least of a, that they've undergone the least of a process as possible. I think when you start, because am I going to go grind my own flour? Of course not. And
No.
there's other things I won't do. There's other things that I'll get where the process has been done, although not many.
Are you going to grow your own lambs and chickens?
Exactly. I'm not going to do that stuff. So, but you get pretty close. I think once you start doing that, once you start making meals out of that, you start to appreciate the difference between that and junk food.
Yes.
Because you can really tell when food has undergone a process once you have seen what food starts out as, and
Yes.
and dealt with foods as it is in its more early stages.
Yes.
So so there is I think there is a benefit to that. I think it's something that we all do. It's all humans eat. So I do think there's a benefit to understanding cooking, because you're going to be eating cooked food. Every
Yes.
person at least every person in America. I don't want to say something. Well, this people, but every person in America, I can say, is eating cooked food. And so cooking is relevant to all of us.
Yes. I believe I've heard that cooking is what created the big brain of human beings. It's like,
Yeah, I feel like I've heard that too.
like because we
Yeah, I
didn't
feel
have
like I heard
to
that too.
digest raw plants and raw animals,
Mm-hmm.
and since we were able to do a lot of I don't know if this is actually true, but because we cooked it, it gave our brains a lot more ability, or I don't know, we were able to digest
More
it
calories,
easy.
maybe
Yes.
digest and obtain more calories. Yeah, I don't know. I have no clue about the science, but
We are the only species that cooks.
I think that's true. You always hate like you say something like that, and then you go, and then some person's gonna think, well, actually, there's
Yes.
spiders cook that, and I'll be like, come on, So, but yeah, I think you're right. I hope you're right,
Yes.
because I don't want to have to interact with a person like that.
No. The spiders who ferment their
Right.
insects.
Exactly. Turn it into wine.
Yes.
Whatever the hell they do with it. Yeah.
They don't create planes and fly around the world like
Right.
human beings
That's
do.
for sure. That's for sure. Unless I'm
Missing something.
missing something pretty big. Yeah.
Very big.
Yeah. Which I don't think I am. Not yet.
No.
Yeah.
no.
Not yet.
Maybe one
Anyway, the
day.
world though, huh?
The
That's a
world.
crazy thing going on right
Speaking
now.
of planes,
Jeez.
not too many planes
Yeah.
flying into Eastern Europe right now.
No, and it's sad. Honestly, it's just sad. It's just sad, man.
crazy.
I mean, yeah, and it's crazy and it's unnecessary, I think.
What makes you say that?
Well, I mean, obviously the most obvious thing is just that people are getting bombed to hell for doing many of them for doing nothing. You know, I
Yes.
mean, they're just bombed to shreds. So, and I mean just the population who are literally doing nothing, just getting bombed. So that's a sad thing, and I think a lot of it too is when you think about. It's easy to think, and people have said this about shootings in the U.S., but it's equally applicable. You can have deaths, you can have injuries, and then you can have the psychological trauma, the
Yes.
distrust, the destruction of it. Think about how many schools and libraries and hospitals will need to be rebuilt. Think about how much routine and order, really, in every sense, has been disrupted for it, of people who are innocent civilians. That's sad, just as a premise to the conversation. And
Yes.
I don't know, to me it doesn't make sense. There's probably a lot of people out there who are smarter than me about geopolitical conflicts and geopolitical strategy, and I've been trying actually to listen to a lot of them, and it doesn't seem like it makes sense to them either. So it's and nobody's saying that directly, but everybody's saying, I mean, so it's one thing that, apparently Russia and Putin thought they'd just go in there and very quickly either decapitate the government or take control, or in some form or fashion achieve some political objective. Maybe whether it's decapitating the government or something else. I don't know. I mean, maybe they had something else in mind, but they definitely thought it would be a short process. That's, I think, that's something that I feel like at least Western intelligence representatives and Western media seems to say over and over again. And it hasn't been a short process. But that happens. People make miscalculations. I think it's a big one. It's a pretty big miscalculation. I mean, you are invading a country, and you really are very wrong about the result of your military action. Could not be more wrong about the decision. So it's a big one, and I think that is a little bit confusing. But then now it's just hard to understand what they're trying to achieve. And if I had to guess, this is just a hunch, but I think now the negotiations about integrating the eastern part of the country, since the southeastern part and the east part, between Crimea and the Donbass and all that, it seems to me like maybe that's the negotiation point. I feel like if I was in Russia's shoes with Russia's objectives, which I'm definitely not, but if I was, my only objective at this point would be to try to integrate those things into Greater Russia, because the political objectives clearly not going to work out.
No.
And they can't sustain this war for very long. So I feel like I would guess that they're in negotiations, and I would guess that it's about how much Ukraine is willing to give up. That's stalling. And I think both sides are kind of playing chicken.
Maybe. I think Russia has a lot of manpower, oil,
Yes.
ability to
Caused damage.
And they have a lot of leeway. Like, if we look into World War II, Russia, they threw bodies. They had a very large death count. I think the highest death count, I don't know, India had a very high death count as well, but for World War II they had
millions. It was
very high.
Yes.
And so, not to say you're not wrong in that there's needless death on that side, but I don't know if that is going to be a sort of factor that they consider and say, all right, we need to turn back because we have such a high mortality rate, because they have so many, it's such a largely populated and such a largely resourced country that they can afford to take big hits.
Yes. There's something in what you're saying. I have a couple thoughts on this, because I did consider this. I did think about this and said, well, maybe the West is kind of just blowing smoke, and really it's Russia can tolerate much more than the West is making it sound. And I think there's a tinge of that. I do. But I also think that the modern world is not what it was in that era. I think what world populations are willing to tolerate is less.
You're right.
I think war is less anticipated, and I also think that, and not just anticipated but welcomed. I think most populations understand that war, when it can be avoided without bad consequences, is better than to engage. Because if the people have nothing to lose from not going to war, people tend to not want to take the risk, because it usually doesn't benefit them directly. They don't see the benefits. They don't see the geopolitical and geostrategic benefits. So I think now that the default is for human beings, I think, at least for the common people, is let's avoid war if we can.
Yes.
I think there's a big factual difference. I think we don't agree on facts anymore, and so we'll have two different sets of facts, and then the side that wants to go to war tends to think that they actually need to, that there's that they have something to lose if they don't. But anyway, so that's one thing. I think another thing is that whether Russia has more people, which it is a declining country in many ways, declining in population. And this might be, I may be wrong, but I know that it's having population trouble.
What do you mean by population trouble?
They don't have large growth in population year to year, and they may have a decline. I'm not sure, but I know that compared to other developed economies, there's a lot of internal health issues. Let's just put it that way. Obviously, huge income inequality and So the country's kind of deteriorating from within a little bit over time, very slowly and very mildly, because it's corrupt. And the reason that's relevant is because that ends up being reflective in their military. Their military power, military suffers a similar fate. It's a reflection of the country, and it's a part of the country, and so the same issues that are in the country writ large are going to be in the military. So I think that's one thing where I think it's clearly been demonstrated that their military is not what people thought it was so far. And truthfully, just based on the statistics, if you've been following, which I have very intently, there's been a very interesting issue to me. The statistics and what the experts and I'm not one of them, as I said, but what the experts seem to say is that they've lost a very substantial portion of their military, and you can't just replace a military. It's not, you don't just replace a military. No. You have to train, and you have to invest, and you have to bring people, in, and that can be tough if people don't want to be in, and so you have to conscript people or pay them a lot or whatever it is that you have to do, and so it's a difficult task. And then you have all the sanctions going on as well. And so I think when I said the game of chicken, what I think is happening is the game of chicken is between will Ukraine, because over time Russia can win. It may take very long, but if they keep at it, eventually, and by win I mean can decapitate the government. That's not a win actually strategically for them, I don't think. But they can decapitate the government. But where does that put them? So I think the game of chicken is, there's a negotiation over territory.
Yes.
Or just over a peace deal where some sides give up some things and so forth. And now it's who is willing to, whether it's Zelensky saying enough people have died, let's give them a bit more and end this thing, or whether it's Putin saying my economy is slowly getting strangulated. My army is getting killed. More and more weapons are being sent into Ukraine. My reputation in the world is getting worse. The mothers in my country who are not seeing their sons are getting angrier. And the risk to my power, the risk to my economy and to the welfare of my country at best, and the welfare of himself at most likely, I think he sees those things as happening. And so now it's a game of chicken. Who's going to fold first? And I think that's why the Russians are being so aggressive, because that's their only chip for negotiation, is just the killing of and the murder and destruction of Ukraine. And I think when you see destruction, if Putin wanted to integrate Ukraine into his country, you wouldn't want to destroy the country that you're going to integrate. That doesn't make sense. That's a liability. It's like, would you tear down a house to the ground before you live in it? Before you go live in it? Of course not. And it's not like rebuilding a house, it's rebuilding an entire country. So to me, it screams there's a negotiation, and that's his leverage.
How do you think it'll play out over the next month or two?
Yeah, I mean I don't know. That's the key, and that's why I'm constantly, refreshing my Google search and refreshing my YouTube search to see if there's anything new, and trying to listen to, mainly when I'm looking for articles or YouTube or whatever, I'm looking to see two things: the generals, whenever they interview, whether it's whatever news, whatever thing, I don't care. It could be it could be Fox, it could be CNN, it could be anything. It could be, there's a French channel that's pretty good on YouTube, actually, that's been reporting pretty well. France 24, I think I've been watching them. CNN's done a good job. And I'm like, I just feel like they've had a lot of good, interesting people talk about the issue. And they've broken it down. All kinds of networks. So, but anyway, that aside, I keep refreshing and trying to see what generals are saying about the tactical situation, who's winning in terms of the conquering of Ukraine or I guess the land assault, really, because that tells you some about Putin's leverage and whether he's losing it or gaining it. And then I'm listening to, people from the various institutes in D.C. that whenever I find one, whether there's a talk or they're on the news, I try to talk to them and they analyze the situation. And really a lot of what I said is just piecing together different things that I've heard. So I'm just going based on what they've said. Obviously, I haven't. I don't have access to U.S. intelligence and this and that. So, but yeah, that's that. So how it's going to go, I think it's almost impossible to tell. And I think a lot of it depends on which side does better in the war. And a lot of it depends on how much heat Putin is getting from his own people and from his own government. And both of those things I don't have access to. So, it's impossible to tell. My heart tells me, I feel, my instinct is Ukraine will come out much better than people thought. And I think that's kind of a given, but I think Ukraine is going to really pull a big one, but that's just my instinct, and I can't say that with any confidence.
They have huge support from the world.
Definitely.
Which is huge. It matters.
Absolutely. It does. I think it matters because I think even on an emotional level, knowing that you're on the right and that the world is behind you and that you're fighting the good fight,
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important.
It is.
Yeah. I'm praying for them, honestly. Every day I'm praying for them because I think it's going to be such an important thing, not just for them, but if they win, for the world order.
Yes.
It's going to strengthen a very weakening West. And I don't want the West to be weakened. I want the West to be strong because I believe in our values, even though I think a lot of them have wilted in some ways. And I think, and I think that's an interesting, repercussion. No matter how the war goes from here, I think that an interesting repercussion of this is that, at least for me, I've gotten a reminder of how great freedom of press and speech is, even with all the bad reporting and the lies and the fake news and all that things.
It's worth it.
It's worth it to be able to hear the other side.
Yes.
Which you can't do in these other countries.
No, you can't.
And it also, another thing it reminded me is how, when Iraq happened and Afghanistan and obviously much further down the line when the decision to invade and everything was very heavily criticized around the early Obama years and really in the late Bush years, and later, even now, I think people are starting to question some things, and really for a variety of reasons, it's hard for me to put my finger on them. We've lost confidence in our government to legislate effectively and to make decisions intelligently, because Iraq and Afghanistan was a blunder.
Vietnam too.
And Vietnam. But really this is a recent thing, and I think this is what's accounting for the current sort of, or what was a lot of, and there still is a lot, but a lot of insecurity about our government. People feeling like it's not intelligent or not acting for the interests of the population. And there's always corruption. I'm sure there's a lot of problems with our government. But when you see how reckless this decision was on Putin's part and how poorly the government worked there to make a very important decision, they created a problem that is in their doorstep now in terms of Ukraine. I mean, I'm not even going to get into it because it's so obvious how strategically poor this decision was. So what that told me is, hey, democracy may not function perfectly all the time, but at least that doesn't happen. Really, not a blunder like that. And we tend to want peace. I know there's a lot of criticism of the U.S. and of the U.S. looking for war and so forth. I definitely think the U.S. has acted arrogant in certain ways in terms of how it's approached foreign relations.
So arrogant.
And I think that's come from the post-World War II world order, where we were arrogant because we own 50% of the world's wealth, and so you start to feel like you're the head honcho. But arrogance nonetheless. But I don't think the U.S. I don't think it functioned with the same level of cold calculation that autocracies functioned.
No.
And that's why we veer a little bit more towards peace and towards stability. And we want like-minded nations around us who are open to trade and open to freedom
And peace.
and peace. And it does boil down in the end to whether you think democracy or autocracy is better for people. Because if you're willing to fight for either one of them, if you're not fighting for the good side, then you're doing the exact same thing the other guy's doing. You know what I mean? If both are equal, then if I fight for freedom and the dictator fights for autocracy, then we're both just as bad. But I believe that freedom is objectively a better system. And I think that's what has been demonstrated in the invasion of Ukraine by Russia.
Yes, and most of history, I feel like it's been, autocratic leaders can do great good very quickly, which is hard in a democracy, in a bureaucratic
Yes.
government.
Yeah, exactly.
They can also do great harm very quickly, which debatably outweighs
Doing
the
great good quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about laws is that they tend to last. Laws get repealed, but it's almost harder than to pass. That's why we've passed new amendments, but repealing an amendment is much more of because you're going against the status quo. You're undoing something. And in terms of laws, that is sometimes I think more of it takes more. And so you should prefer slow change, because whatever you're going to implement tends to stick around for maybe even longer than you wished it did.
Yes.
And so I think that's the benefit of slow change. And so it's frustrating, and it's taken a lot of changes come slowly. And I think also with the very sharp change in the world
that's occurring
that's
within
occurring
the last 10 years.
Yes, in terms of the internet and how it's become more integrated into our daily lives in all the ways.
How we can receive communications, like what
Yes.
you said, how I alluded to World War II, and you said it's a different situation now because
Exactly.
everyone in Russia can feel it nearly instantaneously.
Yes, and anybody who's been following knows. I mean, so they're going to have less Western goods in there. Life has changed. They know they've gotten texts from their sons out on war, or this or that, or they haven't gotten texts from their sons all of a sudden. That things are moving faster, but no doubt. And here, I think in the United States, with the rapid change, law is always slow to catch up. It's always slow to catch up, and it's not a decisive place, because we have, it's like too many cooks in the kitchen. We always have two cooks in the kitchen who have their own recipe. I mean, imagine that.
Yes.
Just to tie it back, you always have two cooks.
At least.
So, if that was my house, I'd try to make an autocracy too, because, I don't mind sharing some, and we do that in the U.S. through the president. Sometimes Joe Biden gets to be the cook. Sometimes Donald Trump. Although I don't think I'd want to eat that food.
No.
I don't think so.
No.
For some reason, I would just because I heard that Donald Trump eats steak well done, I would trust Joe Biden, I think, to cook me food more than I would trust Donald Trump. But
He likes well done steak?
That's what I've heard, and Diet Coke as a combo.
I've heard that. I heard he likes McDonald's a lot too.
Yeah. So, and that's fine if the people like that. Well done steak is,
well done steak isn't as good as rare.
I question that.
Yeah.
To me, if somebody says I eat steak well done, I get a little nervous about them.
Yes. My neighbor was cooking steak, and I was very jealous.
It's just one of those foods that you can't really. There's nothing else like it.
No.
Like
It's just meat.
yeah, it's delicious. It's delicious. But anyway,
It can be bad though.
oh yeah, and I mean,
Bad steak is nothing.
it can be all. Oh, it could taste terrible, and it can be bad for you, and that's the worst combo. But that's like any food. But with steak, I mean, there's technique, and you got to do it right.
Yes.
And to me, right is it better have at least a little red in there.
Yes.
Or
A
you
lot.
know. But anyway, so the U.S. has 2 cooks in the kitchen of the House and the Senate, and a final head chef in the presidency. But nonetheless, you still have, where do laws start? They don't start with the president. I mean, the president may ask for them. They may initiate them. They may push for them. But the first step in terms of getting a law passed occurs either in the House or the Senate. And you always have 2 cooks there. And so things happen slowly. And when it comes to tech, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to and therefore social inequality, when it comes to intellectual property. I mean, think about the change in intellectual property in the last 15 years. The change in what constitutes competition. Whether you could, with non-competes and so forth, there's the market and the economy has been flipped. And so, and I think when you combine that with the fallout of Afghanistan and Iraq, you get a population that wants quick change.
Yes.
Because things aren't working. But toughing it out on the front end is so much better than giving in to an autocrat, because when they mess up, you won't be able to get somebody else to come fix it.
No.
And when they mess up, it's going to happen like that, and you won't see it coming. Here when you get a bill, so let's just say, if you get a bill that's kind of pushed from the left, and it calls for certain taxes or certain changes to the way that companies can associate with each other, or some business implication. In terms of practical, you want somebody on the other side to curve down some edges.
Yes.
You want it to come out a little smoother.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's going to hit the country in the face.
Yes.
You can't go from capitalist America to socialist America and expect it to function smoothly. And you'll never, and this is true in life in general, when when there's a big change, when you make a big decision, it's harder to turn around and go back. When you make change slowly and you build on change slowly, you learn from the mistakes, from the small mistakes even. You learn about consequences that maybe you thought you were smart enough to have foreseen, but weren't. And so certain consequences come out and you go, oh, you know what? When I do this, this happens. So maybe I'm not going to do it. So when you take little bites at changing, it's safer and it results in stability. And that's why the democracy, though it's slow, is stable. And stability is good. So it's underlooked. And I think there's been some risk to our democracy because of that, because people are disappointed because our government hasn't addressed certain issues that have been just waiting to be addressed.
But addressing them too quickly, and then whoever does that addresses other things very quickly.
People make mistakes.
Yes.
It's just that simple. People make mistakes. So
yes.
if if you're an autocrat and you have total control, you can change things fast and on a large scale. That can't happen in the United States. There can be medium change at best. And usually it's been rounded out by the other party to be even less than you thought it was.
Yes.
And if that results in really great things, you learn something. If that results in really terrible things, you learn something. But I guarantee you that the small step is going to result in less. A bad small step is going to result in much less unhappiness than a bad big step,
Yes.
because it's just bigger. It just affects more.
Yes.
So, yeah, and that's I think an underappreciated element of democracy nowadays, that we have to remember is critical to stability, and we can't take life for granted that it's this stable and this good.
No. And I think, as you've alluded to, I'm of Iranian descent, you're of Israeli descent, so we're no strangers to
Exactly.
how terrible this life can be for a nation and its people, and how far the spectrum, how far things can flip.
Yes.
I think a lot of Americans, like you said, there's an arrogance about us. Like, we're still probably the number one superpower in the world.
And by the way, before you keep going, can I just stop to recognize that with freedom, an Iranian and an Israeli happily sit and engage. That's so we take that for granted. We worry, and I'm all for equality, but we worry about these micro concerns of did I blink too much when I interviewed this person? Am I a racist now? It's and I'm not trying to underplay. It's so, to me, equality is so important, and we do need to address real concerns, but we worry about BS. And maybe even if it's not BS, we need to stop sometimes and say, look, this is an Iranian and Israeli having a conversation. We can see every race and gender and expression you can imagine out there when we walk outside and look around. Nobody's harming us. Nobody's getting in the way of us. Nobody says, I'm a second class or third class, or you're a fourth class or first class citizen. No, we're all equal. Is there unfairness? Sure. But that's so important and so underlooked. And we have to stop and remember that, because that's not going on in a lot of other countries.
No. And
you have to appreciate, because this can go away, as you were starting to say.
Yes, it can go away very easily. And I think some Americans don't realize that. They don't realize, like, what we have, like, yeah, this world isn't perfect, our country isn't perfect, lots of mistakes, but it's still a lot better than almost every other country.
No question. But look, it's a different, and I think this comes back to the family and where things start and what you learn.
Yes.
And the stories you hear. And that's not it's certainly a luxury to be American, and it's certainly a luxury to have been raised in this culture and to have had parents that their parents and their parents' parents were raised here. For the most part, it's a luxury. Certain groups, it wasn't. But the bottom line is, you get certain stories, and war and autocracy and mass killings aren't a part of those stories for many people who have had a long line of lineage here.
Yes.
And for some it has.
Yes. And
but for those who didn't express mass killings, I don't think there was, I'm not going to get into the history.
Yes.
But I think we understand what we're talking about here. So I'm not going to say there's that really in American history. American history is actually, compared to many other nations, it's new and it's fairly clean. But anyway, so when that's your story, you take it for granted. The same way when you have a job and you worked it for, however many years, and nobody says anything, whatever, you kind of take that for granted. And then if your boss walked in one day and told you, hey, you're fired, you'd be surprised because you took it for granted. So that's going to happen. My family story, obviously in Israel, is I understood that my country was always contested. It was always up to debate who it belongs to. from the get go. And I'm not gonna say materially my life was not, it was first world good enough, first world good enough. We had tough times in my family, and especially moving here was tough. And I was born in Israel. I lived here for 8 years and moved around when I was around 8 years old. And there were some tough personal things, and getting assimilated to the culture and earning money and having stability. There's certainly that. But when I hear my parents' story, my dad's parents were refugees to Israel. And they lived in very tough conditions to be, in the early years. Very tough conditions. I mean, there's no tough conditions. So, so you hear that and you go, oh, hey, that was happening 70 years ago or 80 years ago. Really 70, 60, 50. When my dad was young, didn't have much. So to me, that becomes more of a reality, and you learn and you were told as you grow up and by the people that you know that there's a risk. And I think partly that's probably why I studied political science at UCSD. I think partly it's the Israel situation, which is always contested. And I'm not, that's also to say that this isn't, I think you could be Israeli and have a sophisticated view of the conflict. So this is not me, just because I'm Israeli doesn't mean I necessarily support everything that's going on and think you have to be objective. But I do have certain life experiences that have shaped my views. And I think that's the same for you as somebody from Iran that saw what revolution really was.
Yes. And I didn't, I was born here. So my parents moved from Iran from the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of born in America. And as I'm being raised, realizing
Yes.
all of these things, and then taking for granted at first this life, like
Mm-hmm.
everyone, all 6-year-olds go through a peaceful kindergarten experience,
Right.
and
Exactly.
all teenagers, pretty much their primary worry is their crush on the playground. And
Yeah.
there's really, this is all normal. And it's like, yes, it's normal for a select lucky few, and then for a lot of other people in a lot of other countries, and a lot of even our ancestors not too long ago, this is extreme luxury.
Exactly. Yeah. No doubt about it. And it's so that's why that's why I'm so supportive of what we have as it is in many
Yes.
ways. I want change, but there's certain things you see that you worry about, and attitudes. It's actually, I think the issue is more attitudes than it is policy.
Yes.
But attitudes lead to policy. It's sort of like if a bunch of people hate the government or hate America as it is for whatever reason, and you vote somebody who has similar feelings, the policies that come attached with that person can be very dangerous. And that's when you start feeling it.
Yes.
So you act on your emotions towards the country or towards a government, whatever they may be. And society tends to look for somebody who expresses those. What happened with Donald Trump, in a large sense, he expressed the emotions, and then and there's certainly policy. That Trump was pretty clear about, or he supported, but you just, I guess what I'm saying is you don't necessarily know the practical implications of your decision.
No.
And so it's a dangerous thing, and it's something that you need to do very carefully.
Very carefully.
And all of this it's interesting because when Trump was president, there's certain things that, obviously there's so many flaws, no question. I mean, there's so many things that were
Not presidential.
not just not presidential, but unsophisticated.
Yes.
Unsophisticated view of dealing with the world. And I think, a lot, there's also too sophisticated. Sometimes it's sort of like, there's the person who goes through life, never really thinks too deep, but everything's going fine. They wake up, they go, they do their thing, they make things happen, and they see things in a very practical, shallow level where it's, you just take on whatever challenge, you figure out how to proceed, and you go on to the next thing. And then there's people who spend their whole life thinking all the time, oh God, but this and that, and they think of every angle, You know what I mean? And I don't know, who would you want to be?
Probably the practical guy.
Probably, right? But what if you're practical, but you constantly make stupid decisions because you don't see enough?
Yes.
So you see how you have to get kind of to the middle ground? And so I think there's a lot of things embedded in what Trump was doing that could have been riffed on and done better. But there's also just so much lack of sophistication on so many things, and short-sightedness, and willingness to, and lack of honor. Being able to say something great about someone, and then the second they turn around and do something you don't like or disagree with you, and it is autocratic. It doesn't mean you live in an autocracy, but when your leader is that way, it means that they don't respect dissent and don't value difference in opinion, and that's so important in a leader.
Yes.
You'll never ever meet a leader in your life that does a good job, that doesn't listen and learn, and maybe even not publicly, but internally has to accept some level of, okay, I made a mistake.
Yes.
Or I misjudged. But I don't know if Trump even did that internally. I mean, the guy seemed very much like the first I described. He seemed like he just was going boom, 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 and he had a vision. He had the way he saw the world, and he was going to just go.
Yes.
And nobody could change his mind. And that can be a problem. That gets to be a problem when you're making really important, difficult decisions where you need a lot of information that your brain could not possibly have. No president's brain could not possibly have, because we have a very very sophisticated and intricate government.
Yes. With
And
a lot of sophisticated problems.
Exactly. So that was my issue with him. But and I guess the way we got to this is that it's you want to find a right leader. You don't want change that's too fast. You don't want change that's arrogant. But you also don't want a nation that's unsure.
No.
And a nation that doesn't have solutions or is really divided. Like if you think about the Senate and the House, if you think about Congress as somebody who is just very into their own head, usually it's because there's two different, or maybe more, but different scenarios, and you're conflict. You're almost arguing with yourself. So I think that's really like very similar to how it is in the Congress. If Congress is the brain of our country, it's in constant argument with itself, and I think that's been very much the case recently, and too much. So we haven't, and so it's hard to get things to change and to move forward in democracy because of that.
Like we said, sometimes that can be frustrating, but sometimes the alternative is much more dangerous.
Certainly, yeah, definitely.
And being divided and giving other opinions is a good idea. And like we alluded to earlier, freedom of speech is good because although there might be fake news, although there might be news that is just not worth us listening to, false, whatever it may be, it's still better than only getting one stream of news.
Oh, yeah.
And
no question. I mean, it's not even close.
Yes, not even close. But if we're too divided, which it seems like we are, but this country, honestly, the United States has been I feel like divided for most of its history.
There's no democracy. There's no group of people that isn't.
No.
I mean, you sit down and you have a cup of coffee with a group of friends. I guarantee you'll find something to be divided about.
Yes.
you go in a classroom, you vote on whether to, you want homework over the weekend. There's going to be some punk who's going to raise his hand.
Yeah, there is.
That's just how it is. That's human beings.
Literally, at least one.
At least one. Wasn't me.
No.
At least not for more homework. I never did mine in high school. But so the question is what you do about it. In some countries, they cudgel it down and try to eliminate it, which is impossible, but they try. Or at least they try to suppress it so that it doesn't affect others. In our country, we say, look, it's all gonna come out, and all the wrong stuff, the true stuff, the good stuff, the bad stuff, the simplistic stuff, the complex stuff, it's all out there.
Yes.
And we trust, or we should, or at least the way that our system is structured, we have to believe that our society will eventually learn to digest this information.
Yes.
And that eventually we'll learn to discern between fake and true.
Yes.
False and or bad faith and honest. Meant to manipulate, meant to inform. We have to learn, and it ties back to the shift in the technology. It ties back. We are now receiving information from a different source. And so we're now learning. If we fail, if ultimately we don't manage to learn fast enough, we will run into problems.
Yes.
Because you can't operate on false information, or it's very tough to be a good decision maker with very bad information. And democracy, ultimately, people ultimately do vote and do have power to change, as you saw with electing Donald Trump. That and I'm not, but again, every time I mention this, I'm mentioning Donald Trump not even out of criticism. I'm mentioning because he clearly was not the status quo.
No.
So change can happen when people vote, and it can be very tough for the country to digest because it's the people making a decision.
Yes.
But if the people don't have access to information that's reliable and meant to inform and presented in a way that's holistic, you're going to start making errors.
Yes.
The same way that if you're the president of a company and your accountant is only telling you half the picture, you're also going to make mistakes. It's that simple. So we do need to get, we need to improve, and we need to improve fast. And thankfully our generation, I think, is much better at it, though there's a lot of improving there as well.
A lot of improving. Like
Yes.
you said, trusting the individuals in the society to be able to discern from the real and the false is where the reason we allow freedom of speech, and I think it works. I think people are pretty good at discerning the bullshit, and
They're getting better.
yes.
I think they're getting better. I think our age is getting better. I think the millennial intellectuals and sort of those who are interested in politics or interested in governance, I think there's a lot of naivete. There's a lot of slogans, but then there are those people who understand where to look and where to get information. I do worry, though. I mean, I do think our generation has a lot of work.
Yes.
And sadly, I think that there's certain things you only learn through experience.
Yes.
And I hope that doesn't mean we have to undergo a tough situation here. I do hope that this Ukraine situation is some reminder to those who take what we have for granted how much better it is than alternatives. But yeah, that's where we're at.
That's where we're at.
Yep.
It's not a simple situation.
Yeah, I prefer cooking
Cooking
than
is
thinking
much
about this.
easier.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cooking is
And you get to eat it afterwards.
eat it afterwards. No, I don't even know what to say.
Well, there's no certainly nobody gets killed during cooking usually,
Usually.
and that's I'm
Actually,
sure there's been instances, but it's
Yeah.
definitely a much more innocent experience.
it's not as malicious for sure.
No, you know, um, but there is, I think, some hope in the future, and I think with this could be a pivotal time. I'm not sure. It feels like it might be with Ukraine and Russia. Really, a big question is what the future of Russia's government looks like. I'm not going to say that there's any chance Putin will be overthrown, but there always is a chance, or at least that there will be some stark changes. I don't know. But if the U.S. can get Russia to pivot more towards the West somehow, if this is our chance, it could be great. It could be a step, a very important step in eliminating a situation where a very powerful and influensive country with a strong military is not as much of our adversary at worst and a friend at best. And that's ultimately what I would want. I don't want to have to sanction other countries. I want to trade with other countries. I want to engage with other countries. So I do hope that happens. And if it will, it'll be, it's either going to be in the next couple years or in a while when he passes. It seems to be one or the other. So, yeah, that's
Wow.
that's the situation.
Hopefully it isn't slow and long and drawn out.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But
Well,
really, all we can do is just worry about our own lives. So I think
yes.
I certainly can't do much more.
And on that note, Eden, do you have any last words for our audience?
Last words. No, just want to thank you. It's been fun. Good to see you again. Not always in California these days, so it's nice to see you, get to talk, and hopefully people enjoyed our very unaccredited conversation here, because I don't think either one of us are qualified to talk about this anywhere but in our living room, which we're doing right now. So
Yes, very unaccredited. So
very
hopefully
unaccredited. Yeah.
everyone enjoyed it.
I hope so too. Hey, thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Mike,
to see you.
Good to see you.
All right.